I have the proof right here. This thing.
This changes nothing.
It changes everything. He is my son. I want my share. He is...
Thank you for helping me, sweetie. No problem, ma'am. Be safe. Okay, here we go.
This evidence is undeniable. I won't accept this. It's a lie.
Your empire is over. You'll regret this.
No, it can't be.
What is it? What's wrong? I always knew you belonged here, son.
Thank you, Grandpa.
I'm ready.
Sometimes the people who claim to know the truth are the ones hiding it. On a bright Saturday afternoon, the Montgomery family mansion stood on a rolling hill just outside Charlotte, North Carolina, its white columns shining beneath the summer sun. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway, and laughter drifted across the perfectly trimmed lawns as relatives gathered for Ethan Montgomery's annual family celebration. Inside the mansion, conversations flowed easily among business executives, socialites, and family members who had spent years enjoying the privileges that came with the Montgomery name. But everything changed the moment a black SUV pulled slowly into the driveway. Sophia Reed tightened her grip on the steering wheel before turning toward the boy sitting beside her. 10-year-old Marcus Reed adjusted the collar of his neatly pressed blue shirt and looked out the window at the enormous house. He had never seen anything like it before. "You okay?" Sophia asked softly. Marcus nodded, though his stomach felt tight. "Do you think they'll like me?" he asked. The question hit Sophia harder than she expected. For a moment, she couldn't answer. Then she forced a smile. "Just be yourself." Marcus smiled back and stepped out of the vehicle. The moment his shoes touched the driveway, several conversations nearby seemed to pause. A few relatives exchanged confused glances. Others quietly whispered to one another. Marcus noticed it immediately. Children often notice things adults think they hide well. Sophia took his hand and led him toward the front entrance. Inside, the grand foyer sparkled beneath crystal chandeliers. Family portraits covered the walls, displaying generations of Montgomery relatives. Marcus studied them as they walked. Every face seemed connected by history. Every face seemed to belong. Sophia signed in with one of the event coordinators before leading Marcus toward the main gathering room. As they entered, dozens of eyes shifted in their direction. Some guests smiled politely, others simply stared. Marcus felt the weight of those stares settling over him. Near the center of the room stood Ethan Montgomery, the 62-year-old founder of Montgomery Holdings. Dressed in a tailored gray suit, he was speaking with several business associates when he noticed Sophia. For a brief moment, surprise crossed his face. Then his gaze moved to Marcus. The room seemed to grow quieter. Ethan excused himself and slowly walked toward them. Marcus looked up at the billionaire everyone seemed to admire. Ethan studied the boy carefully, saying nothing at first. Before he could speak, another voice interrupted. "Sophia." The sharp tone belonged to Victoria Montgomery. Elegant, confident, and always aware of her social standing, she approached with a smile that never reached her eyes. Her gaze landed on Marcus. The smile disappeared. "Who is this?" she asked. Sophia remained calm. "This is my son, Marcus." Victoria's eyes narrowed almost instantly. Around them, several relatives pretended not to listen while clearly listening to every word. Marcus felt his face grow warm. He didn't understand why the atmosphere had suddenly changed, but he could sense that something was wrong. Victoria looked from Marcus to Sophia and back again. Then she glanced around the room as if seeking silent confirmation from the others. Nobody spoke. Nobody welcomed the boy. Nobody stepped forward to make him feel included. Standing among hundreds of millions of dollars in wealth and generations of family pride, Marcus suddenly felt more alone than he ever had in his life. The silence lingered for several uncomfortable seconds before Ethan finally offered a small nod. "Welcome," he said to Marcus. It was a simple word, but before the boy could respond, Victoria stepped closer. "I think there must be some misunderstanding," she said smoothly. This event is for family. Several nearby relatives exchanged uneasy glances. Sophia kept her composure. That is exactly why we are here. Victoria let out a short laugh. Interesting. Marcus lowered his eyes. He did not fully understand the conversation, but he understood enough to know that he was not being treated like the other children in the room. Ethan appeared ready to say something more, but another group of guests approached him, pulling his attention away. Within moments, he was surrounded again by executives and relatives. Sophia and Marcus were left standing alone. The celebration continued around them, yet they felt separated from everyone else. An hour later, guests gathered in the formal dining hall. A long polished table stretched nearly 40 feet across the room. Crystal glasses sparkled beneath elegant lighting. Place cards marked every seat. As Sophia searched for their names, she noticed something strange. There was a card for her, but none for Marcus. She checked again, then a third time. Nothing. Marcus stood quietly beside her. Maybe they forgot, he whispered. Before Sophia could answer, a member of the household staff approached with an awkward expression. I am sorry, he said carefully. There appears to be an issue with the seating arrangement. Sophia understood immediately. Across the room, she noticed Victoria watching. The expression on her face revealed more than words ever could. Determined not to embarrass Marcus further, Sophia asked for an extra chair. The staff member quickly brought one over. For a moment, it seemed the situation might pass peacefully. Then Victoria stood. The sound of her chair sliding across the floor caused conversations throughout the dining hall to stop. Actually, she said loudly, before dinner begins, perhaps we should address what everyone is already wondering. The room fell completely silent. Marcus felt dozens of eyes turning toward him. Sophia's heart sank. Victoria, she said firmly, this is neither the time nor the place. I disagree, Victoria replied. When someone arrives claiming a connection to this family, people deserve answers. Several relatives nodded. Others looked uncomfortable but remained silent. Marcus stared down at the tablecloth. His hands tightened in his lap. Nobody is claiming anything tonight, Sophia answered. We came because we were invited. Victoria folded her arms. Invited by whom? No one spoke. The question hung in the air. For the first time, Marcus wondered whether coming here had been a mistake. He thought about the small apartment where he and his mother lived. He thought about the basketball hoop outside their building. He thought about his friends who never made him feel different. Suddenly this mansion felt colder than any place he had ever known. Across the room, Ethan watched everything unfold. His face remained unreadable, but while others focused on Marcus, Ethan seemed to be studying the reactions of his own family. And what he saw clearly troubled him. The dinner eventually continued, but the atmosphere never recovered. Conversations returned in cautious whispers, and every few minutes Marcus could feel someone glancing in his direction. He barely touched the food on his plate. Sophia noticed and gently encouraged him to eat, but the boy simply nodded without taking another bite. Across the table, Victoria carried on as though nothing unusual had happened, laughing with relatives and entertaining guests. Yet every so often she looked toward Marcus with the same expression of doubt that had followed him since he arrived. After dinner, families drifted into smaller groups throughout the mansion. Some gathered on the outdoor terrace overlooking the rolling hills. Others moved into the grand living room where a piano player performed quietly in the background. Marcus wandered toward a wall of family photographs. There were pictures of graduations, weddings, business achievements, and holiday celebrations stretching back decades. He studied each frame carefully. Every photograph seemed to tell a story about belonging. For a moment, he imagined what it might feel like to see himself in one of those frames someday. Then a voice interrupted his thoughts. You should not take any of this personally. Marcus turned and found an older woman standing nearby. Her name was Eleanor Montgomery, Ethan's sister. Unlike the others, her eyes carried kindness rather than suspicion. People can be afraid of things they do not understand, she said softly. Marcus nodded. Did I do something wrong? The question broke Eleanor's heart. "No, sweetheart," she replied. "You did nothing wrong." Before she could say more, another relative called her away. Marcus was left alone once again. Meanwhile, in another part of the mansion, Sophia stood near a balcony overlooking the property. Ethan finally approached her. For several seconds, neither spoke. "You knew this would happen," Ethan said quietly. Sophia looked away. "I hoped I was wrong." Ethan exhaled heavily. "The family has been talking all day." "I know. And you still brought him here." Sophia met his eyes. "Because he deserves the truth." Ethan remained silent. Those words seemed to weigh heavily on him. 10 years is a long time to keep a secret," he finally said. "I did not keep it for myself," Sophia answered. "I kept it because I thought it was the right thing to do." Ethan looked out across the darkening grounds. The celebration continued behind them, but neither seemed interested in returning. "Things are becoming difficult," he admitted. "They were already difficult," Sophia replied. "Marcus just never knew why." Later that evening, as guests prepared to leave, whispers spread faster than ever. Some relatives openly questioned why Sophia had appeared after so many years. Others speculated about Marcus. Several assumed there must be financial motives. A few even suggested that Sophia wanted access to the Montgomery fortune. Victoria quietly encouraged those conversations whenever she could. By the time the last guests departed, rumors had reached nearly every corner of the family. Standing beside the front entrance, Marcus looked back at the mansion one final time before getting into the SUV. He felt unwelcome, confused, and embarrassed. Yet he also noticed something else. Throughout the entire evening, Ethan Montgomery had never once denied him. And for reasons Marcus could not explain, that small detail stayed with him all the way home. 3 days after the family gathering, the rumors had only grown stronger. Sophia could feel it every time her phone buzzed. Friends who had not spoken to her in years suddenly wanted updates. Former co-workers asked carefully worded questions. Even people who barely knew the situation seemed to have opinions. Meanwhile, Marcus tried to focus on school. He never mentioned the mansion, but Sophia noticed the change in him. He was quieter than usual. One evening, while finishing homework at the kitchen table, he finally asked the question she had been dreading. "Why do they not want me?" Sophia set down the coffee mug in her hands. "It is not you they do not understand," she said gently. "Then what is it?" Marcus asked. She looked at her son and realized she could no longer avoid what was coming. "The truth," she answered. Across town, Victoria Montgomery sat in her office reviewing messages from family members. The uncertainty surrounding Marcus irritated her more each day. She had spent years protecting the Montgomery family's reputation, and she refused to allow unanswered questions to linger. To her, Sophia's return after 10 years seemed suspicious. The following morning, Victoria arranged a private meeting at the Montgomery estate. Several close family members attended, including Ethan. The atmosphere was tense from the beginning. Victoria wasted no time. "This situation is damaging the family," she declared. "Every day more people are talking." Ethan remained calm. "People talk about everything." "Not like this," Victoria replied. "The rumors are growing because nobody knows the truth." Another relative nodded. "She has a point." Ethan folded his hands. "And what exactly do you propose?" Victoria leaned forward. "We settle it once and for all." At that exact moment, a member of the household staff entered and informed them that Sophia had arrived. The room fell silent. Ethan had invited her earlier that morning without informing the rest of the family. Seconds later, Sophia stepped into the room. She looked nervous but determined. For years she had avoided this confrontation. Now she was done running from it. Victoria stood immediately. "Good," she said. "Since you are here, we can finally get answers." Sophia looked around the room. "I came because Marcus deserves honesty." "Then give it to him," Victoria replied sharply. "Give it to all of us." Ethan watched carefully. He noticed that Sophia did not appear frightened. Instead, she seemed relieved. as though she had been waiting for this moment. "What do you want?" Sophia asked. Victoria crossed her arms. "Proof." The room became perfectly still. "Proof of what?" Sophia asked. "Proof that any connection exists between Marcus and this family." Several relatives exchanged glances. No one interrupted. No one defended Sophia. Victoria continued. "If you truly believe what you have implied, then there is an easy solution." Sophia already knew what was coming. "A DNA test," Victoria said confidently. "Let science settle the matter." To Victoria's surprise, Sophia did not hesitate. She did not argue. She did not look offended. Instead, she simply nodded. "Fine," she said. "Let us do it." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Victoria's face. She had expected resistance. She had expected excuses. What she did not expect was complete agreement. And as Ethan quietly studied Sophia's expression, a feeling began to grow in the back of his mind. Perhaps the person most confident about the results was not Victoria at all. The DNA appointments were scheduled for the following week, but the waiting period felt far longer than anyone expected. Every member of the Montgomery family seemed to have already decided what the results would say. Victoria, more than anyone, carried herself with complete confidence. She spoke about the upcoming test as though it were merely a formality. In private conversations, she assured relatives that the results would finally end the controversy. Several family members agreed. Some even began discussing how embarrassing the situation would be for Sophia once the truth came out. Yet the person they expected to be nervous never appeared worried at all. On the morning of the test, Sophia and Marcus arrived at the medical office 15 minutes early. Marcus sat quietly in the waiting room, watching people come and go. "Are you scared?" Sophia asked. Marcus thought for a moment. "Not really." "Why not?" she asked. "Because the truth is still the truth even if people do not like it." Sophia smiled. The answer sounded far older than 10 years. Across town, Ethan arrived separately. As he entered the clinic, he noticed Marcus sitting alone reading a book. Most children his age would have been playing games on a phone or complaining about being there. Marcus simply looked up, smiled politely, and returned to reading. Ethan found himself unexpectedly impressed. Meanwhile, Victoria entered with several relatives. The moment she saw Sophia, she offered a confident smile. "This will finally clear everything up," she said. "I agree," Sophia replied calmly. The certainty in her voice bothered Victoria more than she wanted to admit. The testing process itself was simple. Samples were collected, paperwork was completed, and everyone was informed that results would take several days. As the group left the clinic, Marcus walked beside his mother toward their vehicle. Behind them, he could hear relatives whispering again. One voice suggested they should prepare for disappointment. Another laughed quietly. Marcus pretended not to hear, but the words followed him all the way home. Over the next several days, the rumors became even worse. Social circles connected to the Montgomery family discussed little else. Some people claimed Sophia had invented the entire story. Others suggested she was chasing money. A few even speculated that Marcus had been coached for years. Every new rumor seemed more ridiculous than the last. Yet the rumors continued because uncertainty allowed them to grow. Through it all, Marcus remained remarkably calm. He attended school, finished his assignments, helped neighbors carry groceries, and spent afternoons practicing basketball at the local park. The people who actually knew him never doubted his character. One evening, Ethan sat alone in his study at the mansion. The room was lined with books, awards, and photographs representing decades of success. Yet his attention remained fixed on a single question. He thought about Sophia's confidence. He thought about Marcus's composure. Most of all, he thought about the fear he had seen in the faces of certain family members whenever the subject arose. For the first time, Ethan began wondering whether some people were not afraid of the results proving Sophia wrong. Perhaps they were afraid of the possibility that she was right. And as the day of the results approached, that possibility seemed to make Victoria increasingly uncomfortable. The day the results arrived, the Montgomery mansion felt different. The usual confidence that filled its halls had been replaced by nervous anticipation. Family members, who had spent weeks making assumptions, now gathered in silence. Victoria arrived early, determined to project certainty. She greeted relatives with polite smiles and reassured everyone that the matter would soon be finished. Yet beneath her calm exterior, an unfamiliar tension had begun to grow. Ethan noticed it immediately. By late afternoon, the entire group had assembled in the main conference room. Sophia sat beside Marcus at one end of the long table. Marcus looked around quietly. Unlike the previous gathering, he no longer seemed intimidated. Whatever happened today, he knew he had done nothing wrong. Ethan entered carrying a sealed envelope that had been delivered directly from the testing laboratory. The room fell silent. Nobody reached for a drink. Nobody checked a phone. All eyes followed the envelope. Victoria leaned back confidently. "Let us finally put this behind us," she said. Sophia offered no response. Ethan sat at the head of the table and slowly opened the package. The sound of paper sliding from the envelope seemed unusually loud in the quiet room. He began reading. His expression remained neutral. Several seconds passed. Then another several. The silence became unbearable. "Well?" one relative finally asked. Ethan continued reading. Victoria folded her arms. "There is nothing complicated about this. What do the results say?" Ethan lowered the pages and looked directly across the table toward Marcus. The boy met his gaze without fear. Then Ethan spoke. "The results confirm a biological connection." For a moment, nobody reacted. It was as if the words had not fully registered. Victoria blinked. "What?" Ethan looked back at the report. The laboratory found a confirmed biological relationship. A wave of shock swept across the room. Several relatives stared at one another. One woman covered her mouth. Another looked down at the table in embarrassment. Marcus remained still. Sophia quietly closed her eyes for a moment. Years of waiting had finally led to this single sentence. Victoria immediately shook her head. "There must be a mistake." Ethan's voice hardened. The report was conducted by one of the most respected laboratories in the country. "Run it again," Victoria insisted. "There has to be an error." "There is no indication of any error," Ethan replied. The room became increasingly uncomfortable. The same people who had questioned Marcus now avoided looking at him. The same people who had repeated rumors suddenly had nothing to say. For the first time since arriving in the Montgomery family's world, Marcus was not the one under scrutiny. Victoria was. Ethan slowly set the family's archived records. Ethan finally decided to investigate. One afternoon, he visited a private storage facility owned by Montgomery Holdings. Thousands of documents spanning decades were organized in secure archives. With the help of a records manager, Ethan began searching through files connected to the period mentioned in the laboratory note. Hours passed without success. Then, just as he was preparing to leave, an aging file folder caught his attention. The label contained a name he had not seen in years. Sophia Reed. Ethan opened the folder. Inside were several administrative documents, employment records, and a sealed envelope that appeared untouched. The envelope had been dated almost 10 years earlier. What shocked him most was the signature across the back flap. It belonged to his late brother, Charles Montgomery. Ethan stared at it in disbelief. Charles had passed away years ago. Slowly, Ethan opened the envelope and unfolded a handwritten letter. As he began reading, the color drained from his face. The letter revealed that Charles had been aware of circumstances surrounding Marcus long before anyone else. More importantly, Charles had instructed that specific information be protected until the appropriate time. The contents were not fully detailed, but one sentence stood out immediately. "If anything happens to me, make certain the boy is never forgotten." Ethan read the line again, then a third time. The letter raised more questions than it answered. Why had Charles written it? Why had it been hidden? And why had nobody mentioned its existence? That evening, Ethan arranged a private meeting with Sophia. When she arrived, he placed the letter on the table between them. The moment she saw the handwriting, her expression changed. "Where did you find this?" she asked quietly. "In the archives," Ethan replied. Sophia picked up the letter carefully. "I thought it was gone." Ethan studied her face. "You knew about it." She nodded slowly. "Charles wrote it shortly before his death." "Why did he believe Marcus might be forgotten?" Ethan asked. Sophia hesitated. For years she had protected a secret she never intended to reveal. But now the truth was beginning to surface on its own. "Because someone wanted him forgotten," she finally said. Ethan felt a chill run through him. "Who?" Sophia looked directly into his eyes. "The answer to that question is exactly why I stayed silent all these years." For several long seconds, neither Ethan nor Sophia spoke. The weight of the conversation settled heavily between them. Ethan had spent decades building one of the most respected family legacies in North Carolina, yet the possibility that someone inside his own family had deliberately hidden the truth left him deeply unsettled. "You believe this was intentional?" Ethan finally said. Sophia nodded. "I know it was." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Then tell me everything." Sophia looked down at the letter resting in her hands. 10 years ago, Charles wanted the truth protected. Not because he was ashamed, but because he was afraid. "Afraid of what?" Ethan asked. "Afraid of what certain people would do if they discovered how much was at stake." Ethan frowned. Those words immediately captured his attention. What exactly was at stake? Sophia hesitated before answering. More than money. The following morning, Ethan contacted the Montgomery family's legal counsel and requested a complete review of archived estate records connected to Charles Montgomery. The attorneys were surprised by the request, but they complied. Within days, dozens of documents were gathered for examination. As the legal team worked through the records, a pattern slowly emerged. Certain files were missing. Others appeared to have been relocated years earlier. A few documents had been amended under unusual circumstances. Individually, none of it seemed significant. Together, however, the inconsistencies raised serious questions. One attorney eventually discovered something even more surprising. Hidden among older estate records was a supplemental inheritance document signed by Charles less than 6 months before his death. Intended to establish a protected trust connected to a future heir whose identity was deliberately withheld from public records. The legal team could not determine why the trust had never been activated. But one thing was obvious. Charles had expected that individual to play an important role in the future of the family. News of the discovery spread quickly through the Montgomery family. This time, the reaction was far more dramatic than the DNA results. Family members who had previously dismissed Marcus now found themselves asking very different questions. Some worried about potential changes to inheritance structures. Others feared public embarrassment if the full story became known. Victoria was furious. She demanded an emergency family meeting and insisted the new documents proved nothing. "This is speculation," she argued. "A trust document does not change reality." Yet her confidence seemed forced. For the first time, relatives began challenging her directly. Several reminded her how aggressively she had opposed Marcus from the beginning. Others questioned why she appeared so desperate to dismiss every new discovery. The growing tension exposed cracks that had been hidden for years. Meanwhile, Marcus remained completely unaware of most of the legal discussions. He continued attending school and living his normal life. One afternoon, he received an unexpected invitation from Ethan. The billionaire asked him to visit the estate for lunch. During the meal, Ethan observed the boy carefully. Marcus was polite, thoughtful, and surprisingly mature for his age. By the time lunch ended, Ethan understood something important. Whatever secrets remained hidden in the past, Marcus himself was not the problem. The real problem was the growing evidence that someone inside the Montgomery family had spent years making sure the truth would never be discovered. 2 weeks later, the Montgomery family gathered once again inside the mansion that had become the center of so much conflict. This time, the atmosphere was completely different. The whispers were gone. The assumptions were gone. Even the tension that had dominated previous meetings seemed to have been replaced by something else. Reflection. At the front of the room sat Ethan Montgomery, surrounded by family members, attorneys, and advisors. Sophia sat quietly beside Marcus. Unlike his first visit, Marcus no longer looked uncertain. He had learned an important lesson through the entire ordeal. The opinions of others could change, but the truth never did. Ethan stood and addressed the room. For months, and for some of us, years, this family has operated on assumptions rather than facts. His voice carried through the room. Many people formed conclusions before they knew the truth. Several relatives lowered their eyes. Nobody needed clarification about whom he was referring to. Ethan continued. The DNA results confirmed what should never have been questioned. The legal review confirmed that important information was hidden for years. And the documents left behind by Charles make one thing very clear. Marcus was never meant to be forgotten. Silence filled the room. For the first time, nobody challenged those words. One by one, family members began offering apologies. Some were emotional. Others were awkward. A few admitted they had followed rumors because it was easier than asking questions. Sophia listened without bitterness. She had spent too many years carrying the weight of other people's judgments. She was finally ready to leave that burden behind. Then Ethan surprised everyone. He turned toward Marcus. Would you come stand beside me? Marcus looked at his mother. She smiled and nodded. The boy walked to the front of the room. Ethan placed a hand gently on his shoulder. The first time you entered this house, many people made you feel unwelcome. Marcus remained quiet. That should never have happened, Ethan said. Not here. Not in this family. Several relatives wiped tears from their eyes. Across the room, Victoria sat silently. The confidence that had once defined her was gone. She understood that the story she had spent years controlling had collapsed completely. More importantly, she realized that the family no longer viewed Marcus through her perspective. They viewed him through his own character. Ethan then made his final announcement. The Montgomery family would formally recognize Marcus as part of the family legacy moving forward. Educational opportunities, mentorship programs, and future family participation would all be extended to him. It was not about wealth. It was about belonging. The room responded with quiet applause. Marcus looked around and noticed something remarkable. Many of the same faces that had once stared at him with doubt now looked at him with respect. Later that afternoon, after everyone had left, Marcus stood outside on the mansion's front lawn beside Sophia. The sun was beginning to set over the North Carolina hills. Do you think everything will be different now? Marcus asked. Sophia smiled. Some things will. What about the people? Marcus asked. She looked back at the mansion. People can change when they finally choose truth over assumptions. Marcus thought about that for a moment. Then he smiled. The boy who had once stood outside those doors feeling unwanted now walked through them with his head held high. Not because a test changed who he was, and not because a family finally accepted him, but because the truth had revealed what had been there all along. And for the first time, everyone else could finally see it.
Sometimes the hardest battle is not fought in a courtroom or in a boardroom, but they are fought inside our hearts. Marcus never became a better person because of a DNA test. He was kind, respectful, and worthy from the beginning. The only thing that changed is how the other chose to see him. This story reminds us assumption can build a wall, but the truth has the strength to break them down. Before judging someone, take a moment to learn their story. Before believing the rumor, wait for the fact. And before deciding someone doesn't belong, remember, everyone deserves dignity and respect. In the end, the greatest legacy isn't wealth or status. It's choosing truth over prejudice and kindness over assumption. If you like this video, remember to like, share, and subscribe. And see you in the next story. Thanks for watching.